You're standing in front of your closet, arguing with yourself. One more layer, or is that overkill? You check the weather app. Gives you one number, then a smaller word underneath. Feels like you add a scarf, just in case. You've never once had to think about whether you'd survive the walk to your car. Now imagine losing that entire negotiation. No closet, no fabric, no woven thread of any kind. Just bare skin, hairless skin, standing in the wind of an actual ice age. Your fingers going numb before you've even started shivering. That was you, biologically speaking, for most of human history. Somewhere around 1 million years ago, your ancestors lost the thick body hair that used to keep them warm. For a staggering stretch of time after that, they had nothing to replace it with. So how did a hairless, nearly naked species survive multiple ice ages? What do they actually wear, and when do they start wearing it? And why might your own irrational hatred of being cold trace back to the exact same problem? By the end of this, you'll know when clothing was invented, what the earliest garments actually look like, and why one entire species of ancient human may have lost the ice age specifically because of what it never learned to sew. Here's the strange part. Losing that body hair let early humans sweat efficiently and stay cool while hunting in the heat of Africa, chasing prey across long distances until the animal simply overheated. It also left them with nothing between their skin and a freezing night. For a long time, scientists had no real way to date when clothing filled that gap. Fabric rots. Hide decomposes. Ice Age wardrobes simply don't fossilize. So in 2011, a research team at the University of Florida, led by biologist David Reed, tried a stranger approach. They studied lice. Head lice and body lice are close relatives, but body lice can only survive on clothing. By measuring how long ago the two genetically split apart, Reed's team estimated when clothing itself first appeared. Their answer? Roughly 170,000 years ago. An earlier study, in 2003, had put the number closer to 107,000 years. The exact figure is still debated. But here's what's fascinating. Both estimates land well before humans started migrating into colder climates and higher latitudes, a shift that began roughly 100,000 years ago. Reed put it simply. Early humans were tinkering with clothing long before they actually needed it to survive. This wasn't panic. This was preparation. And it means that for hundreds of thousands of years, your ancestors were both hairless and unclothed at the same time. That is a long time to just be cold. Clothing itself has two very different levels, and archaeologists can actually tell them apart in the fossil record. The first level is simple. A scraped animal hide, thrown over the shoulders like a cape. Stone hide scrapers used for this kind of clothing show up at archaeological sites dating back close to 1 million years, at places like Scheveningen, Germany, and Kesem Cave in Israel. The second level is complex, cut, shaped, and stitched into something closer to what you'd actually call a garment. That required a completely different tool, the eyed needle. Here's the part nobody talks about. The oldest confirmed eyed needle in the world wasn't made by your species at all. It was found in Siberia's Denisova cave, carved from a large bird bone about 50,000 years ago. And researchers believe it was likely made by Denisovans, a separate, extinct branch of ancient humans. A possible older bone point from Siberia cave in South Africa, dated to around 61,000 years ago, might push that record back even further, though researchers are less certain it was actually used for sewing. Needles like it start appearing across the rest of Eurasia by around 40,000 years ago. Archaeologist Ian Gilligan at the University of Sydney has pointed out that simple cape-style clothing has a critical weakness. Hide-scraping tools disappear from colder, higher latitude sites specifically during the coldest glacial periods. Not because people left those regions, because a loose hide draped over your shoulders isn't enough once temperatures fall far enough. You need something sealed, something tailored. That same technology later helped humans go even further. In 2024, Wyoming state archaeologist Spencer Pelton and his team identified 32 bone needle fragments at the Laprille site, dated to nearly 13,000 years ago. Researchers had assumed these needles would turn out to be made from mammoth or bison bone, since those are the animals that dominate the site. Using mass spectrometry, Pelton's team found something different. The needles came from foxes, hares, bobcats, mountain lions, lynx, and even the now extinct American cheetah. That detail matters more than it sounds. It means these Ice Age foragers weren't only bringing down mammoths. They were also systematically trapping small, fast predators, almost certainly for their pelts. Pelton's team argues these tightly stitched, fur-fringed garments were part of what let people push into some of the coldest, most exposed corners of the Americas. Without that kind of tailoring, researchers suggest that migration may not have happened at all. And then, Story gets a second character. Homo sapiens weren't the only humans wearing clothes during the Ice Age. Neanderthals were too. Researchers have identified a 3-ply cord fragment stuck to a stone tool at a site in southeastern France, dated to somewhere between 41,000 and 52,000 years old, where patterns on Neanderthal front teeth resemble those of modern Inuit people who soften hides for sewing by pulling and chewing them. Researcher Bent Sorensen calculated the metabolic cost of surviving northern European winters unprotected, and concluded Neanderthals likely wore 1 or 2 layers of skins and furs, with separate fur wrappings tied around their feet using leather cord. Biological anthropologist Sarah Lacey goes further, arguing that any hominin living above roughly 40 degrees north latitude, about where Madrid sits today, needed real functional clothing just to survive. She suspects Neanderthal outfits may have resembled a basic parka, trousers, and boots. Some researchers have gone looking for even more specialized technology. One pilot study proposed that Neanderthals may have used birch bark glue, a substance they're already known to have manufactured to help seal seams and produce waterproof garments. Not everyone agrees on how far this goes. Some researchers argue Neanderthals barely used clothing at all. Others argue their garments were just as effective as anything Homo sapiens wore. Most of the evidence sits in between, around the same broad window at Bacho Kiro Cave in Bulgaria. Archaeologists have recovered bone tools and personal ornaments linked to some of the earliest Homo sapiens known to have reached Europe. The toolkit arrived as a package. Sewing technology, ornamentation, and expansion into new, colder territory, all showing up together. So Neanderthals weren't clueless. They understood fur, hide, and cold. But here's the part nobody talks about. A 2012 study by researcher Nathan Wales modeled exactly how much body coverage each species would have needed in their respective environments. The number is specific, and it's small. Homo sapiens sites required covering roughly 80 to 90% of the body. Neanderthal sites required closer to 70 to 80%, a gap of about 10%. That's not a huge difference in cold tolerance. It's a much bigger difference in clothing strategy. A 2016 study led by researcher Cotter compared animal bones recovered from Neanderthal sites and early Homo sapiens sites side by side. Homo sapiens sites contained far more remains of foxes, minks, and other small fur-bearing animals. Not the kind of animals you hunt mainly for calories, the kind you use for fur trim, wrapped around hands, feet, and faces. Neanderthal sites, by contrast, were dominated by bones from large animals like bison. Good material for a simple cape, not for a tailored hood or a fitted sleeve. Clothing wasn't only about staying alive either. Archaeologist Olga Soffer, working with colleagues James Adavasio and David Hyland, examined roughly 80 tiny fragments of fired clay from sites including Dolny Vastanis in the present-day Czech Republic, each one holding the impression of woven cord and cloth. The weaves dated back around 27,000 years to the Grevetian period, and some were fine enough to rival cloth worn today. The same sites also preserved evidence of woven baskets and knotted nets, suggesting a whole textile tradition existed well before anyone thought to look for it. Soffer noticed something else. The same carved bands, caps, and belts showing up on those textile impressions also appeared carved onto small human figurines from the same period, the so-called Venus figurines. In other words, Ice Age humans weren't only sewing for survival, some of them were also weaving for style, tens of thousands of years before anyone invented a written word. So what actually decided who kept surviving through the Ice Age? The answer is simpler than you'd think. It wasn't which species could endure the cold better. Neanderthals were, biologically, probably the more cold-adapted of the two, with stockier builds and barreled chests suited to conserving heat. It was which species stopped trying to endure the cold and started engineering around it instead. We assumed raw toughness would win this contest. But here's what actually mattered. The species willing to cut, layer, and tailor its way out of a problem outlasted the species that mostly wrapped itself in hoped. Endurance lost to invention. That instinct never disappeared. It's still running in you right now. Every time you feel a slight chill and immediately want to fix it instead of just enduring it, you don't tough out a cold room. You adjust the thermostat. You layer a hoodie over a t-shirt without a second thought. You buy a specific jacket rated for a specific temperature, trusting a number you never bothered to question. You might even own a base layer engineered specifically to pull sweat away from your skin, which is functionally the exact same problem your hairless ancestors were solving a million years ago. None of that is softness. It's the same 170,000-year-old habit that let one version of humanity outsurvive another. Your ancestors didn't get through repeated ice ages by gritting their teeth. They got through by refusing to just be cold and doing something about it instead. Species loses its fur, roughly 1 million years ago. Spends hundreds of thousands of years figuring out what to do about that. It invents clothing tens of thousands of years before it strictly needs to. It learns to cut and stitch, not just drape and hope. It starts decorating what it's sewed, long before it starts writing anything down. And somewhere in an Ice Age landscape, two different kinds of humans face the same freezing wind, with two very different strategies. Only one of them is still here to complain about the cold. So the next time you reach for one more layer, or nudge the thermostat up 2 degrees, or complain that everyone else seems fine while you're freezing, know what that actually is. It's not weakness. It's the same specific stubborn habit that got your entire species here in the first place. Long before anyone called it fashion, and long before anyone called it survival gear either. Still standing in front of the closet, still solving the same problem your ancestors solved first,